Audio Production.
Yeah. 17:30. I'm like, hey, what's up? Hello. Since you're pretty awesome, you came in the door.
Oh, Jack. Hey, what's up? Hello, my friend.
Hey, what's up? Hello.
Hey, what's up? Hello. Yeah, well, welcome to Metaverse Monday. This is an exciting first episode for me. I think you're probably the ideal, perfect person to have on as my first episode. You've been there for my entire journey over the last, well, you've been there for 7.5 out of the last 8 years. There was a little stint that I did at Adventure Fund before I met you, but just so the audience knows, Jack was basically my camp counselor at a program I did, an entrepreneurship program called Draper University. And I remember seeing Jack, and I didn't really like him the first, month because he had all these rules that I had to follow. And then basically, literally the day the program ended, his whole persona changed, and all of a sudden he was friendly with all of us and decided to be a cool dude. So we become incredibly close over those last 7 years.
It's been a lot of fun to watch your journey. I would love if you could tell your story about how you got here through the places you've lived.
That's a great question, Jack. Let's see. I'm born in Detroit, so everybody knows. I'm a proud fan of Eminem and the whole Detroit hip-hop community. I then went to school at Indiana University, which I'm not really scholastic type of person, but I made it. I graduated. And when I graduated, about the last 6 months, I learned about virtual reality. And I learned about it from a YouTube video that I saw when I was living in my apartment in college. So I basically just threw everything to the wind and said, okay, I'm going to go full on head first into virtual reality. This was 2015. And so I moved to San Francisco without any sort of plan at all, other than just a dream that I was going to start virtual reality companies at some point in my life. And when I moved there, I had no income. So I think I started off living in a hostel for it was like $15 a night. And it was really sketchy. There were 6 people in this bunk bed infested area. I had my suitcase, which was just a carry-on suitcase. That was everything I had with me, just one carry-on suitcase. And it wasn't ideal, but it was nice. One of my friends named Corey told me that his college roommate from Michigan University had just moved to San Francisco as well, and I should contact him. So I sent Sam a text message and I said, hey, Corey told me that we should meet up. And I came over to Sam's house that night. We went out to the bars in Mission, and at 2 a.m. we came back with me and his 2 roommates, Ari and Mike. And I went to the bathroom and I walked upstairs. And when I walked towards the bathroom upstairs, on my right, I saw this walk-in closet, and I thought, what a great place to sleep. So I came back downstairs and I said, hey, can I sleep in that walk-in closet and pay you guys like a few $100s each year to live here? And so that's how my journey got started. I literally
$100 a year in the Bay Area is pretty good.
To be fair, Sam likes to make a profit, and he charged me $700 a month. He's been a walk-in closet that his clothing was still inside of. Every morning he'd come in there and he'd reach over me to get his clothing. And, but it worked. I stayed there for about a month and a half, and I got a job with one of the first venture funds that was specific for virtual reality. It's called Rothenberg Ventures. And I did that for a few months and then got fired because, and this is the exact quote, I was a bull in the China shop and we're the China shop.
Thank God, that is an entrepreneurship in a nutshell right there. You've got to be the bull in the China shop.
I can't believe I've held any job for more than 3 months, to be honest with you. So yeah, so that was San Francisco. And then once I got fired, I decided, okay, I got to figure out something that keeps me in the Bay Area. And I applied to Draper University, which was a program Tim Draper was putting on. And Tim Draper, just so everybody knows, is one of the top venture capitalists in the world. He invested into Skype in the early days. His dad was, I think, accredited with starting the first venture fund in Silicon Valley, or one of the first in the 60s. And so moved down to San Mateo and walked into the building. And sure enough, in 2015, in I think September, is when I met Jack. I saw you sitting there.
I don't know if you guys know this, but I was just talking about Tim Draper and his Bitcoins and we got cut off. I don't know. That's a little, what's going on here?
I heard nothing you said. Wait. Let's start over from the top. I didn't like my thing either way.
Okay. Can I give you I want to let you up with this one. So you were on couches, you were in closets, you were in bunk beds, you were in the the thing after. Like, tell that. I think that's a great like narrative of like what you did and how you got there. And then if I can ask you one other question after that, because I know this is your interview, I would love, and you can let me know if you want me to ask this later on, but I would love for you to talk about what the metaverse and VR and AR was like in Silicon Valley in 2015 to 2017, because this was so early compared to like what everyone else is participating in now. Like, what was the environment like? What was the culture like? Who were the players? Like that stuff. I can try to do some of the same in the blockchain space later on, but I think that would be like a really cool touch point.
Audio production.
Yeah. 17:30. I'm like, hey, what's up?
What's up? Hello.
Since you're pretty awesome, you came in the door.
Oh, Jack. Hey, what's up? Hello, my friend.
Hey, what's up? Hello.
Hey, what's up? Hello. That was our theme song in 2015.
God, that runs it back to San Francisco nights.
It's crazy that we've known each other for 7 years.
Absolutely wild. Okay, before we get into this, can you do everybody a favor? And can you tell your story about how you got here through the places you've lived, whether they be the most luxurious accommodations or otherwise? We might hear about some otherwise, but can you give the people the story?
I would love to tell you.
Started in Detroit in a nice house. Shout out my parents, very appreciative of my upbringing. And then I went to Indiana University, which is where I saw on YouTube a video of virtual reality. This was 2015. And I decided that that is what I was going to dedicate my life to. I was going to be a virtual reality person the rest of my life. And so I moved out to San Francisco right as soon as I graduated 2015. And I had no plan. I had nothing other than a dream and my carry-on suitcase that I brought with me. And I started living in hostels. I think the first hostel was $18 a night. There was 6 people in there. It was bunk beds, and I was very protective of my suitcase. I thought people were going to steal it. Connected me to someone that's lived in San Francisco and said, hey, you should go meet Sam. He's a great guy. You'd get along great. So I texted Sam and I said, hey, can I come hang out with you guys? I came over there. We went out to the Mission District and we went back home around 2 a.m. at night to his apartment with his 2 roommates. And I went upstairs to go to the bathroom. And when I was going to the bathroom, I walked by what can only be described as a decently sized walk-in closet. And I went right back downstairs and I said, Sam, can I pay you a little bit of money and put a twin mattress on the ground of that walk-in closet and I can sleep in there? And he said, sure. And he negotiated pricing with me. Sam loves to make a profit, so I'll deal with it. And that's basically how I got started in San Francisco. So I'll show the picture in the post-editing, but I was literally sleeping on the floor on a twin mattress in someone else's walk-in closet in a 3-bedroom apartment. And all I was doing was just hosting events, virtual reality events. And I eventually got an internship with this venture fund called Rothenberg Ventures, which was at the time the only and the first virtual reality, augmented reality focused venture fund that existed in the world. So it was a dream position. I was so happy about it, ready to dedicate my life to that company. I was going to be there for the long run. I was going to help them out. I was going to get equity in the company, and then I was fired. And when I asked the founder why I was fired, his quote was, you're a bull in the China shop and we're the China shop. We can't have you here.
So
that is entrepreneurship in a nutshell right there. You've got to be different like that.
Proudly fired. Yeah. For anyone listening that's been fired, it turned out to be one of the best experiences of my life, because as soon as that happened, I started looking around for ways I could stay in San Francisco, and I came across this program called Draper University. And Draper University was started by this really well-known venture capitalist named Tim Draper, who Jack and I both know well. And Tim is accredited. His dad's accredited with starting one of the first 5 venture firms in all of Silicon Valley in the 60s. That lineage is passed down to Tim, and it's also passed down to Tim's son. And they're just an iconic family. And a lot of people know about him because he was an early investor in Theranos, which was that company that imploded on itself, and things of that sort.
But really,
he had a lot of wins too. Skype, Baidu, Hotmail, SpaceX, Tesla. He bought Bitcoin from the U.S. government after they were seized from the U.S. government in the early days. So yeah, he's an OG in the space. The family is doing incredible work supporting entrepreneurs, but absolutely legend.
And great resume. I mean, he's invested early into everything. He's been involved at the heart of Silicon Valley, and he's definitely one of the pioneers of the metaverse. So I applied to this program. I got in and I drove down to San Mateo and I walked into the building, and we all sit around in this little circle, the whole class of the 30 entrepreneurs that got accepted to this program. And it was a 7-week long, fully immersive program. You're sleeping in the building. You have a roommate, you're sleeping in a bunk bed. Anyways, so I was sitting in that circle next to my roommate, and all of a sudden, Jack walks into the room. Do you remember that?
I totally remember that. So I was entrepreneur in residence at the program. So I had gone through probably about a year prior. And Tim, being the legend in the blockchain space that he is and in venture capital, I stayed around for a year to be an entrepreneur in residence for the opportunity to learn venture from him. So by the time I had met Don, I was 3 sessions in, was trying to break into venture, and I was living where I worked. So like, you've got to create this like separation between like who you are in this environment and who you are actually, because you just can't cross the boundaries with the entrepreneurs in any capacity. So you've got to kind of hold these lines. But it was tough because Don had a crew of entrepreneurs there that were absolutely productive and charismatic and fun. And it was so hard to be on the sidelines being like, guys, we got to do this today. We got to do this today. And then watching them go have fun at night and be like, I just want to be there. But nonetheless, first time we met, we were in a circle doing a get to know you kind of thing that you do with 30 people. And you had asked me, what do I think is the next opportunity in technology? And just immediately said, whatever it is, it's not the watch. And you were like, thank you. Absolutely not the watch. Like, that's not where it's going. I think at the time, Google Glasses were around, and that was kind of when people were being glass holes. So it wasn't those either at the time. But yeah, from that point forward, we just love talking about technology and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, you were, I don't know how else to describe it other than you were essentially my camp counselor. And so you had to kind of like scold us when we would do the wrong stuff. But I could tell the whole time that in the back of Jack's head, he's like, this is not me. I don't want to be scolding these guys. I want to be a part of this.
No, it was a tough balance to learn to walk. But I think I learned a lot about leadership that year in that way. Just being able to create the separation and stay focused while also supporting others in their mission. I thought that was a lot of fun to learn how to do.
Yeah, you were fantastic. And then basically as soon as the day I graduated, you kind of took your Draper University counselor hat off and we became best of friends. And that was 7 years ago, which is a crazy stat to say.
Absolutely wild.
It's wild. And
That Fetty Wap track was a great throwback to San Francisco nights.
Yeah, so we started with the Fetty Wap because that is the track we used to always drive in the Uber from San Mateo up to San Francisco whenever we go. Brings back good memories. All right, Jack, well, I have a question. So this podcast is about you, but it's also about me because this is the first episode. I've had motivations to start a podcast for a long time, as you're familiar with, and we're calling it Metaverse Monday because I just love the alliteration of the two M's. So I'd like to first ask you a question. When you went to Draper University, just before that, you were trying to be an accountant in your life. Do you have any battle scars from the accounting world, or what kind of set you off on that journey to jump into entrepreneurship?
So I went to college not long after the 2008 recession, and I was like, I need some practical skills. Like, I don't want to come out on the other side of this in an environment where I can't do what I need to do. And so I studied accounting and philosophy. And how could you possibly figure out how like accounting and philosophy could come together? But the one thing I knew was I was not going to be an accountant, just definitively not. So after I graduated college, I went to New York and was going to try to get into wealth management and asset management. And then I had a conversation, two within 12 hours that changed my life. One was at night, and I learned about the blockchain. I learned about smart contracts, which are these like if-then statements that are encoded in technology that automate processes. And I saw it as a way to remove the need for accounting. It was this triple entry accounting process. It removed the need for third parties and trust, and it just connected. I was like, this is the future. But how do I participate? I have no idea. Next morning, I had an informational interview with a venture capitalist, which I knew nothing about. And what he said that resonated with me was, as an investor, if I invest in you, I only do well if you do well. And that to me is an alignment of interest that I think is so incredibly pure, because you just want to see people do well. It really helps people kind of build the future that they want to build. So I was supposed to sign a lease later that week. I told my buddy, hey, I'm really sorry, but I've got to go out to Silicon Valley. And so I didn't know how accounting and philosophy were going to come together, but Bitcoin and the blockchain seems to be the perfect use case of those two concepts. So I never stepped into accounting, wouldn't have done that for a day in my life, but it was a really practical skill set. And I'm happy I studied it.
It's interesting how life works, you know, where you're going one direction and then all of a sudden you say, okay, that's the totally wrong direction. I'm making a hard left.
And the wild thing was I packed my bags and went back to New England that day, the day that I had that informational interview. It was just so definitive that I was going west. And I went with my parents to a lake that I never go to. I just never go there. It's just not the place I enjoy going. But I went that day and I saw a friend from high school on the path and he went to Draper University. Like, what are the chances that this place I haven't been in years, he hadn't been in years, we're there at the same time? I told him about the fact that I just learned about the blockchain adventure. He goes, send me an email. You've got to go to this program. I was out there 2 weeks later. So from the point of identifying this to making the decision to go was such a short period of time, but there was no other option. Like, it was so clear in my mind what I wanted to go do, which was to be an investor that helped build out the blockchain space. And this was 2014. This was Bitcoin. This was the Ethereum white paper had just come out. There wasn't even the chain release to it yet. Not even that it wasn't out there. So this was really early days, but there was something that just connected and made sense. And that same thing happened through this like entrepreneurship journey a few times. I could just remember key moments where I was like, yep, this is the destiny. This is what we have to go do. And you just like a door opens and you go that direction. So that was a really cool start to this journey and something I'll always remember. It was just so serendipitous.
That is almost around the same time as when I started really diving headfirst into virtual reality. It was, I think, about 6 months later, a year later in 2015. And basically, I knew that I also wanted to invest into companies. I didn't know what to build as an entrepreneur within the virtual reality space, but I knew that there was going to be some opportunities. And if I could kind of spread my chips across the table, probably one of those companies would start to grow. And so that was my logic.
What was your like first investment thesis around the metaverse? Like when you saw this and you're like, I want to be an investor, like what did that look like to you? What were you thinking about? What helped you think about good opportunities and bad opportunities?
So I don't think you know this because I don't tell many people the story. This was my first ever investment. I was still at Rothenberg Ventures, and I was not supposed to be an investor. They told me, you're not an investor. You have no decision-making power. You have no ability to make deals, which only meant to me that I should go find a deal and try to fund it, right? And so I don't remember where I met him, but I think his name was Tatsuki, and he barely spoke any English, but I think I was at an event because I saw what he was building. So on this desk is a teddy bear, exactly what you're imagining, just a teddy bear, except the eyes were totally hollowed out and there was 2 cameras in the eyes of this teddy bear. And Tatsuki was sitting behind the teddy bear in a virtual reality mask, and everywhere he looked, the teddy bear would also look that way. And he was basically trying to create a system where parents, because his parents were back in Asia, where parents could still be with their kids over a long distance. And first off, great story, very heartfelt. And so I came into the venture fund the next morning. I said, we have to fund this deal. Like, we have to give Tatsuki money. And they looked at this teddy bear, and these are grown venture capitalists, and they're cracking up. They're like, that is the dumbest idea Don we've ever heard. Not going to fund that. Somehow, I don't know how, I sold them on the idea of giving this kid $100,000. We also worked on getting him a visa to come move and live in Silicon Valley full time. And that was the first ever deal. So to answer your question, I didn't have a theory. I just thought whatever's cool, I'm going to invest into.
Whatever happened with that company?
It did not work out.
Classic story of early stage companies.
Yeah, it did not work out. I don't think they ever got traction. They didn't really manufacture it. It was basically a science experiment, but it was cool. I mean, he got to live in Silicon Valley. He had some money and just a true hustler, and very, very much respect for him. So that was my first ever investment. And then once I started to host these events, basically what I would do is I would bring on different VCs and investors to a panel, and I would host these in dingy basements. This is 2015 virtual reality. So we're talking like I'd bring up a stool and sit them basically just in a basement, and there'd be 15 people in the audience, and these investors would talk about how they invest into companies, how they think about virtual reality. And over the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 months, ended up doing that for years. But over the first year, I really started to develop kind of the instinct for what VCs look for in companies. And so that evolved my thesis into realizing that it's all about scale, it's all about revenue, and it's very important to find the right founder that has either a track record of success, whether that's with starting companies or just a track record of success in their life. You had a very similar playbook for how you built out your network. Do you want to share some of the events that actually, let's take one step back. I got to say thank you to you, because out of all the people, all my friends, you were the one that always showed up to my events and helped out. You checked in people at the door, you carried chairs, you cleaned up, like you were instrumental in helping me with all these events. So
we were in the trenches. Like we were in the trenches. We were both, I don't know, I was 24. You might have been like 22 at the time.
Yeah.
We were both raising venture funds for the respective technology, me and blockchain, you and metaverse. You coined the term venturepreneur, right? Like we're taking a very entrepreneurial approach to the venture capital, being first time fund managers. And I just saw you as a real one. I mean, like if you were going to be putting your time and effort into building that as a resource for a platform for you to launch your career on, I wanted to do whatever I could. If that meant checking people in at the door, I'll show up checking people in the door. Don't care. Just want to see my friends succeed, because it takes so much resolve to build a business. It takes so much vulnerability to put ideas out there and go do this thing. Like you just need some people in your corner. So I love supporting people that are like after it, and you're a real one. So that was a lot of fun to do.
And those events are hard. I mean, you hosted, you're the only other person I know that, again, to your point, we were just hosting these like dingy events in basements, just trying to get anyone that would come. Those are hard to do.
They were brutal. They were relentless. And at the end of it, they were somewhat rewarding. But it was a great way to create deal flow. It was a great way to create networks. It was a great way to create value for other people in the ecosystem. And honestly, in those early days of both of our technology, people just needed a place and space to gather and talk. Like there wasn't enough going on. And things like Discord weren't really centers of communication for these ecosystems. Twitter wasn't there really for these things.
I don't know
for
if Discord.
I don't know if Discord even existed in 2015, did it?
Definitely wasn't a center of communication if they didn't exist then.
Yeah.
So we had to do stuff like this. And I don't know about you, but my events were so fun to see the people that were interested in the technology, because in the early days of the blockchain, like going back to, 2015 was when we started doing events. 2016 was when we did more. The ecosystem was so eclectic. You had libertarians that didn't want any regulation by the government. You had technocrats that were blown away by this decentralized database. You had venture capitalists who were salivating over this opportunity for challenges that blockchain solved in their ecosystem. And so the crowd was just so diverse, but people had such a passion for the future and for creating the future. And that was just so energetic and a lot of fun to participate in. So I know we both did events, moderated panels, spoke on panels, and did a bunch of other things like that just to, build the brand reputation, evangelize the technology, and try to move the ecosystem forward.
It's crazy because as you know, I joined Facebook to help with their virtual reality stuff. And I had a meeting today with this guy who started this virtual reality company called Weaver, WEVR. His name's Neville. And I told him, I said, Neville, in 2015, 2016, you had a room at the VRLA event where you were giving demos of your product to everybody. And there was a line, 100 people outside of it. And you guys wouldn't let me in. Like you wouldn't let me come.
And look where you are now.
Yeah. So no, but it was like that. I mean, there was celebrities, local celebrities that were basically just people that had, raised 10 to 20 million for their company. Same within the blockchain space. And then there was us that were kind of community builders, connectors, and just loved the energy, which I imagine is very similar to the days of when Steve Jobs used to go to the home computer clubs. And it's just kind of like a very nerdy, everyone's goofy, this big dream that this technology is going to impact everything. Just wait till you see, but nobody could actually see it, and it wasn't going to be seen for years.
Like, I don't know if you had similar experiences with the VR. I tried to understand the technology of the blockchain. Like, really, I'm not a developer, so I'll never understand the code. I'm not going to write in Solidity to do smart contracts, but everyone writes white papers and research papers. So you can understand the technology at a pretty fundamental level. And I thought I was doing a pretty good job at this. But then in 2017, I listened to a researcher talk about zero proof knowledge. Zero proof knowledge, which is this consensus mechanism, which is a way of agreeing on things without showing any proof. So basically, without showing proof, you can prove that something is true. This is so far into computer science and encryption and mathematics, and it is only now starting to get talked about and implemented in the blockchain. So this was back in 2015, 16, 17, somewhere in that range where we were talking about it, and I was seeing the first person. I thought I had reached a level of knowledge and then realized I was so far over my head with some of these things that were happening. But that deep research and that kind of scientific approach is what moves these ecosystems forward. So even your guy that you invested in that was like a scientific project, that moved the ecosystem forward because it needed to be done. Like science needs to be implemented in the technology, and then you've got to take shape technology into businesses, and then you got to scale them. So there's definitely an evolution, and those early days are so fun. Like it did feel like being at those clubs. Like it felt like being at a club of just really passionate techno people.
I think the interesting part about that is we found our niche not by understanding the deepest parts of the technology, but by looking at it from, okay, those types of people that are geniuses geniuses need money and they need funding. And maybe we understand funding and they look at that in the same way that we look at what they're doing. And that is kind of true. Like if you're a borderline genius technologist and all you want to do is build tech and do deep, analysis, you don't really care that much about business. It's more of a distraction. And so that was really where both of us found our footing was, okay, we know all these smart people. We know that they need money. Let's go figure out how we can start some sort of funding vehicle that gets them money.
Can I tell you how little I knew when I first moved out to Silicon Valley?
Yeah, go.
So I went to DU. I came out 2 weeks after I found out about the blockchain, and we went to a hackathon at Berkeley, and it was held in the Berkeley football stadium. So there were probably 2,000 people just sprawled out around the hallways and every possible space within the stadium. On a hackathon, I was in a team of 4 or 5. We're talking, I didn't know what a wireframe was. I didn't know what was what. So basically, I got relegated to like at 2 a.m. I came up with a tagline, and we were in like that delusional phase of a late night sprint where anything is funny. So I was like, Flutter, sort of like Craigslist, and it just hit. And that was what we had. And that was my entire contribution over an entire weekend of a hackathon. But what I learned about that weekend was that what you're talking about, there are people that understand technology and there's people that understand business. There are geniuses that get both. Elon's one of them. But that's why you have co-founders, well-rounded team of early stage businesses that have strong technology, strong business development background are really important. And that well-balanced team is one of the things that I think I was looking for in the blockchain space in those early days.
Do you remember how you got your first dollar of investment? So just so everybody knows, both Jack and I started venture capital funds like in our, 23, 24, 25, age 23, 24, 25. Do you remember how you raised your first dollars to get your fund going?
Yeah, so it was a lot of meetings, a lot of hustling, and a lot of doing a lot of stuff that led to a thesis. And basically at that time, our thesis in the blockchain space was that the technology was too early for the scale of use cases people were talking about, because at that time it was a lot of enterprise stuff, finance, healthcare, land registrations, things like that, not necessarily the consumer focus. So really those use cases would require significant scale. They would also require significant buy-in from established institutions and technology partners. It would have to fit within a tech stack. And then the third thing was that there was a lot of regulatory uncertainty in the environment. So our thesis was around finding early stage blockchain companies that were working on really great use cases and bringing them into emerging market where the infrastructure wasn't established. And this could be the early set of infrastructure around use cases in finance and land registration, identity, healthcare. And then from there, move them through emerging markets into bigger use cases. So start with where the use case was meeting the scale of the technology, start with where the technology could be implemented and where regulators were willing to work with the technology to solve problems that were really significant. So that led us to emerging markets. So we did a lot of fundraising out of Pacific, which is where we were initially focused. But the first commitment came from Tim Draper. And he is one of the biggest proponents of the blockchain. He's got a network of investment funds. And so we were day one investment.
How much did he give you as the first check?
So he committed $1 million to our fund, and we were able to use that. So he committed $1 million. We were continuing to fundraise. At that time, initial coin offerings started to become more prevalent. And
2017?
Around 2017 or so. And what we were seeing is that it's a really incredible means of raising funding. The early companies that did it, Augur, Gnosis, and a couple others, were able to raise from their community really quickly. But that became a way that people were started slapping blockchain onto everything and raising ICOs, and then they ran wild. And what we saw in there was, with the regulatory uncertainty about how the SEC would treat initial coin offerings, plus the lack of standardization in the agreement of how you invest in companies, there needed to be a jurisdiction that supported this as a fundraising process. And so while we were raising the fund, we were working with private companies in emerging markets and governments in emerging markets to bring the technology in as counterparties. And that evolved to working with governments on policy to support initial coin off. So before we closed out the fund and made an investment, we dissolved it and turned it into an operating company. And then Tim supported us with that, with initial seed money. And we took that as the capital to start working with governments to create special economic zones where we were going to work with the community to create policy that supported best practices. So Balaji's out there right now talking about network states. I don't know if you're familiar with Balaji. He is a Silicon Valley OG. I think he was the CTO at Coinbase at one point. Yeah. He wrote a book called Network States. And basically the thesis is that communities had always been tied to physical locations, but now now with the internet, culture and community spread to a global establishment, right? Like people can be a part of a community from any different part. From there, you can create a nation, an online nation. And then from there, you could get, you could use that leverage of the community of the and funding to work with a physical location to establish a jurisdiction. So you could start to create a network of states that are online communities attached to physical. He's really pushing for it to start as online. Where we started was with the physical. So we went and started working with the government to create policy to establish a special economic zone. And then we were going to get the community around supporting that initiative. So we were working on some of these concepts really early, but from a different approach than what's being talked about right now.
And if I recall correctly, you were going to Papua New Guinea. You were living in not fully built buildings, if I recall.
They were homes. I'll give you the story. So a night out with you. So it was me and you and my co-founder Shane were out in San Francisco, and Shane had come back and said, guys, I just met with he was from Papua New Guinea originally. He came up to Draper University. That's where we met. There was a delegation from his country in the area, and he was talking with them and said, I think there's a great opportunity to start a venture fund and bring technology into these different places and start to do some of that. The next night, Shane and I got a bottle of bourbon, and over a bottle of bourbon, we established our company on a handshake. And I told him, I will go to the end of the world to make this work. I will go anywhere that is needed. I'm going to come down to Papua New Guinea and we're going to make this happen. So I went down to Papua New Guinea with a visa on arrival, a 2-month stay, 1 meeting lined up, and a big vision. That's all we had. And so I got down there and got into a hotel for the first few nights. Culture in Papua New Guinea is definitely a multi-generational culture within a household, and even multi-family. Their cousins are even second, third cousins, but they're family, right? And so they were incredibly hospitable. They created space. I came in and lived with Shane and his family for the duration of the trip from there. But it was an absolutely wild experience because we were networking around, and we ended up by the end of it talking with their central bank, talking with the board of the major banks, talking with different implementation partners. And from there really launched this initiative to bring the technology in. We left with an MOU from the government to create support and work towards the special economic zone. So definitely in that time learned a lot. Just as an anecdote, we were in Papua New Guinea trying to explain what the blockchain was. And this seems like a really difficult thing because infrastructure for technology is not as robust as here in the United States. But the problems they experience are felt so intimately that when we started talking about the principles of the blockchain, they started answering questions that they were asking. So we were at this table with some loan and saving societies members, so different banks in the region off of East New Britain, the island of East New Britain. And they were asking us questions about the technology, and someone else would be like, no, wait, it's a database, it's solving this. And then someone would be like, okay, but like what happens if, someone saves money here and they try to loan money from there and here, and someone's like, well, hold on, it's a public ledger, we're going to be able to see that. So now they can't get over collateralized. So they were experiencing problems so intimately that the technology just made sense to them. And what it highlighted for me was there truly was an opportunity for emerging markets to leapfrog technology. That was something that was talked about in the early days of the blockchain a lot. The analogy was in Africa, they didn't go from no phones to landlines to cell phones, they went no phones to cell phones. And so the equivalent would be from a lack of financial infrastructure to the blockchain as an infrastructure, or a lack of identity to digital identity on the blockchain. And that was really what we were trying to work with through Day One Investments and subsequently Ledger Atlas as the special economic zone.
Do you see comparison? So with this war in Ukraine, the more I've kind of learned about how people are taking their money out of Ukraine or out of Russia through the blockchain as a safe way to do it. So if there's restrictions on exporting your capital, they're doing it now on the blockchain as a way to basically subvert some of the government oversight. That was always something you were talking about, not in the illegal way, but in the sense that, hey, emerging markets and places that are in trouble and don't have proper financial infrastructure are going to benefit from the blockchain, maybe even more than the United States will initially. And we're kind of seeing that.
It's happening. Like El Salvador adopting it as a currency was a really significant step forward because their justification was, we have the US dollar as one of our currencies, and that government is making decisions to print more money, which is inflating and hurting their economy, inflating the value of the currency and hurting their economy in that way. And they said, we need a better solution. So I don't see the technology as subversive. What I see it as is a way for small market cap fiat countries, large cap stock, small cap stock, large cap fiat, US dollar, Canada, euro, small cap being like Lebanon, who's getting decimated by inflation, Papua New Guinea, basically anyone with smaller GDPs. I see this as a great way for them to create more financial stability, financial transparency, and to give their citizens more trust in the system of their economy. And so I really think that emerging markets are going to adopt this in a really big way. So people are talking about Bitcoin, and we're sitting here being like, the trade value is this or that. The impact of this technology is going to be in emerging markets. And as it starts getting adopted as a store of value, both by nations and as individuals in these places who are watching their currency be deflated 10% a year, so over 10 years, it goes down to nothing, basically. I think that we're going to start seeing this as a store of value, and that's going to be its main adoption. People really dunk on Bitcoin for slow transaction times, for volatility, and everything else. And I think that we just need to step back and say, this is a startup, right? Like, it's been around for 13 years, and it now already has a market cap of $1 trillion, and it didn't grow stably, right? There were ups and downs along the way. But if you look at the fundamentals of adoption, countries that are adopting it, wallets that are holding it, the way that people are using it, all of those metrics are increasing. So I think we're really trending in the right direction there. And when we finally get more institutional adoption, I think we'll get stability. I think we get more adoption in emerging markets and by people. So it's kind of this like chicken and the egg situation, but we're growing into that stability right now.
It makes me a little jealous to hear about crypto living up to the promise, or at least headed in the direction of the promise that you were told in 2015, because I look at virtual reality and I came into this wide-eyed thinking this is going to impact healthcare. It's going to impact your ability to socialize with friends. It's going to be something that will basically change the way that you do all of your work, because you'll sit in your headset and you'll have all these monitors that can float in front of you in a virtual world. And really all that's manifested is that it's great for gaming at this point, you know? And that's not true with the blockchain and with crypto. Like, it really is a great way. I mean, sure, there's that part of it, but I don't know, would you agree with me that I think crypto's delivered on more of its promise over the last 8-9 years since you and I have been involved in VR and AR and crypto than VR has?
I do. I really do. And I think that people that look here and say like, oh, the NFT market's crashed, NFTs aren't worth anything, aren't acknowledging the validation that happened within the technology.
You were talking about NFTs in 2016, 2017. You were 5 years ahead of this stuff.
I didn't see it being adopted the way that it did. I will say the thing that I got most wrong in the blockchain space is how much culture has driven adoption. Because I was looking at the technology saying it's not scalable. It's a really big challenge. The only people that are going to take on the RD are institutions. At that time, R3 was a consortium of banks, and they were looking at that. There was a healthcare version of it. So I was like, this is going to be, R3 was a consortium of banks, JP Morgan, Bank of America, a bunch of others that were doing research on how to adopt the technology. And they were kind of maybe they created their own chain at one point. And I was saying enterprise, but I'm blown away by how much culture has driven adoption. Now we're seeing music NFTs, art NFTs, community NFTs, membership, different versions of it. And the hype went up, the hype went down, people have left, but I'm watching people really build right now. And the validation is still there. So through the market cycles of crypto, where we've watched these reach all-time highs and everyone gets excited and then it drops and everyone's like, it's dead. And then it goes up again and it's dead. We're watching the technology adapt in terms of its resilience, in terms of its ability, and in terms of the community. It just keeps growing in that way. So I really do think it's outperformed a lot of expectation, but it's easy to dunk on these companies. The biggest concern I have in the space is that these companies are startup. They're absolutely startup, but there's 27,365 price discovery. And if you
mean the trading is 24/7.
Yeah, it's 24/7 on the trading of these things, but they're startup. And so if you know venture, what happens is a company has an idea, you get a seed round, you use that money to build validations. 18 months later, you raise another round, there's price discovery. You build the validation, user acquisition, etc. Then there's price discovery. So you're going through price discovery 4 or 5 times over the first 3 to 4 years of the life cycle of these companies. And right now you've got crypto on the second month of the release of a project trading on platforms, and people are, trading this way up. And there's this huge disconnect between the fundamental value of the technology that's being built, which is real, but takes time, and the speculative value that it's being traded at. And that's where everyone gets taken or, starts to have like it's a scam, etc. So that's been hard to watch. I wish we could get better fundraising mechanisms to support early stage businesses and then more responsibly go to the community. I think we're finding our way within it, but best practices still really need to be established. Going back to what you were talking about earlier, like in your side of it, VR, AR is not manifested to the promise that you guys were provided. What are the biggest bottlenecks and what's the biggest disconnect from the narrative that was told to where you guys are today? What happened in between there?
So I raised my first dollar for my fund in October 2015. And I think you probably remember, but on the last day of Draper, we do a pitch event where everybody gets 5 minutes on stage in an audience of 50 investors, and you're allowed.
Forget your rap. I'll never forget your rap introduction.
So
Everyone had to have a walk-up song. So everyone's like picking like Bruce Springsteen or like something from their home country. Don walks up, no music, it just drops bars.
I remember I walked up there, no music, really awkward, and I turned to the audience and I said, "You might have noticed that I'm the only one that walked in with no music. That's because I'm an entrepreneur. I love to make stuff. Here we go." And I just started rapping. Yeah, I was like, I'll rap a better verse. I'm living in the metaverse, whole thing. And going to what we were kind of touching on earlier, like how life just aligns up. That night before, I had printed off these deal memos of the top 30 companies I would give money to. And my plan was to go hand them out to every investor in the audience right after I got off stage. And I was so nervous after I did my pitch on stage and if you remember, I also did my pitch in a VR headset. Like I could not see the audience. I had a VR headset on, walking around on stage, talking to the audience. I looked like a clown. And so I was so nervous that I just went back in my seat and I picked up the stack of deal memos and I said, shoot, I forgot to hand them out. So as soon as the event ends, all the investors start dispersing and leaving. And I'm just like scrambling to go give them out. And the first person I gave my deal memo to was this guy named Larry. And he turns to me, yeah, you know Larry. And he turns to me and I offered to, or he said, hey, I liked your pitch. You know, I'd love to take you up on your offer that you made on stage to take some investors out to lunch. You know, it'd be great to do that. And so I went to lunch with him the following week and I was sitting in the cafe in downtown San Francisco and he walks right by me and I said, Larry, I'm over here. And he looks at me and he goes, oh shit. He goes, I double booked. So totally forgot he had the meeting with me. And I'm sure I didn't sit there for that long, but you know, I was just basically watching him as he had his meeting with the person on the other end of this cafe. And there was multiple times where in my head, I'm like, should I just leave? Like this probably isn't going to be worth it. You know, this isn't probably going to be worth it. I should just leave. You know, my ego was getting in the way. I wanted to say, okay, I should just leave. You know, you don't need to just sit here. But thankfully I stayed because he came over, nicest guy in the world. And we ended up not just meeting for an hour, but talking for 4 hours. And at the end of that, he basically said, okay, you know, if I helped you get going, I gave you some money, would you be interested to deploy some capital? And so going back to your question around what were the promises back then that we were believing was going to happen with the VR industry that didn't manifest, I think the one big thing is we just thought that there was going to be consumer adoption at a much more rapid pace of people purchasing these headsets. So, you know, at the time there was maybe 1 million headsets in the market. And today, if you add up all of the top companies, there's maybe 20 million in the market. I have no idea, but it's not 400 million that we were promised and we hoped for at this point.
Is that a hardware problem? Is it an adoption problem? What's driving that disconnect?
I think that the hardware is not comfortable. There's no way around it. It's not comfortable. You're wearing a brick on your face, and there's been no company that's done a good enough job to reduce that to the size that it needs to be. Everyone keeps throwing in new features and new stuff to make it more, better, and improve, when really, in my opinion, it just needs to be more comfortable and a better form factor for me to use that for an extended period of time. So, you know, if I look back at 2015 to if I was to say in 2015 where I thought the market would be in 2020, I thought it would look sleek. I thought it would be slim. I thought it'd be lightweight. Essentially, I thought there would be an Apple-like product that is invented. And unfortunately, we're still in the moment where it's like a developer kit almost, to the point where it's clunky and people don't want to wear it. So there's rumors right now. There's like some, you know, I'm watching this closely. There's more rumors than ever before that Apple's coming out with a headset this year. Apple's never, we got the scoop on Apple, you know, and they've never disappointed on any product. They pioneered the iPhone, they pioneered the PC, they pioneered the iPad. I think hopefully Apple comes out with a $3,000 product that is worth the money, and it is just a mind-blowing new technology. But until that point, I really think VR is kind of reduced to gamers and the, you know, smaller use cases that tend to happen.
And within that use case of like gaming and things, are you seeing good retention? Like the people that are using it for it, are they using it for it? Or is it a novelty where they like dabble and then they kind of move on? Is there real retention? Is there a core, like, is there a there for it?
For gaming, there's a real there. No questions asked. Like gaming has incredible ability because gamers want to be in a different world. They love that idea of being immersed somewhere else. I think for the everyday person or the everyday use case, like just speaking from my own experience, I can't be in that headset to do my remote work. I still have to have a monitor here, a monitor to my right, when what should be happening is I put on a lightweight headset and a virtual monitor pops up in front of me, a virtual monitor comes over there, and I can create as many as I want. And all that doable. It's all doable. Just nobody's been able to put that together in a consumer package that is Apple-like.
Yeah, I would only use it at home. There's no way I'm going to a coffee shop with it. You get robbed every time. You're sitting there for 4 hours not looking around. You're going to wake up, your bag's not going to be there. Where'd my wallet go?
Yeah, I used to think that I would put on the headset in a cafe and I would grab my bag or keep it close because anyone could have taken it. Yeah, exactly.
Like put your foot through the loop or something.
Yeah, but you know what's funny is that you started off doing blockchain and I started off doing VR AR, and we always talked about those two coming together, but we talked about it from the stance that you were going to be the infrastructure for VR AR items, and you know, when you purchase a virtual good, it will be on the blockchain. Like that was always our thesis. You and I would say that for 8 years. But as soon as Mark changed the name of Facebook to Meta, it seems like the whole world decided that's kind of what's going to happen. And it might have been one of the most beneficial things for the industry because it really was the first time where these two industries merged under the same term. And it's not exactly how we saw it, but how do you define the metaverse? Because it's really now in my head defined as this multiplication, it's not a word, of different technologies that are in crypto, are in VR.
So I really look at crypto and the technology under it as infrastructure technology. So like companies shouldn't be a blockchain company. You're a company that has blockchain as part of your technology stack, or you're a company that's a gaming company using NFTs. You're not an NFT company, right? Like I think the technology should fit within the use case and within the technology stack. And I think that's exactly how it's going to be used. I think digital assets that are represented as NFTs are going to be in the metaverse. I think that currency to interact is going to be in the metaverse. You know, each game, each ecosystem might have its own currency associated with it for its own reason, but interoperability between those ecosystems is going to be much easier given the infrastructure of the blockchain. The Ethereum, what it truly is an electronic virtual machine, which means it's a global computer all around the world, which means that everyone's operating on the same system. So there's interoperability. If you build something, I can put pushes and pulls of information to it, and I can take information with me as I go. So the third way that
give us an example of that, because that's hard for people to understand, like a tangible example. How would that work?
So one example is ENS. So really quick, the 3 ways I think metaverse adopts the blockchain is NFTs, the currency, and then ENS. And ENS is the Ethereum naming system, which is similar to the domain naming system of Web 2 and everything else.
And just sorry, I don't want to cut in too much, but just to explain the domain system for people that don't know, it's like when I go buy donstein.com, that is my domain naming system for how that property is identified on the web. So you're saying ENS does that same concept, but with Ethereum?
Yeah, and to go a step deeper, when you put in www.google.com, what is actually happening is you're putting in a request to a physical location. Like you're calling on a book in a library that's stored in Chicago on the 4th floor in this. It's a physical location that you're calling to. What Ethereum naming system is a call to a name, and that name can live on any database. And so what that means is if I create an ENS and I want to use it to log into a service like Linkstao, or I want to take it and log into a service like, Decentraland, not sure if they're doing that yet. My information in my community can be ported with me. Like that ENS is my username, it's my email, it's my web address, it's all of those different things. It's basically my digital representation, and it connects with my wallet and all these different things. So what that means is because it's not a physical location, my name is not living on someone's server. It's living on a decentralized network. So I can always take it with me. And so one of the great things that I think we'll see in the not too far future is if I'm on Twitter and I've got all my followers and I get kicked off Twitter or something, my followers stay. Like I don't have any connection to that resource. Same with Facebook, same with everything else. All those things live within silos. If you have an ENS and you have a list of people that are following you in all those different places, they can come with you to the next platform. So you have way more autonomy over your digital identity and your network and the value that you're creating. So I think that's going to be really important. It's going to allow you to log into multiple services through the metaverse with the same name. It'll allow you to hold a wallet that has the currencies of each of those. It's a way that people can see who you are and see your avatar, etc. So I think that that's one of the really big ways that we'll see it. NFTs, which are digital rights. We talk about NFTs for a moment really quick.
Yeah. Can I ask one question on the ENS thing? So how is that? It's not different than Ethereum. It's just basically a way to name what's happening on Ethereum. correct?
So Ethereum is what we call a layer one technology. And so what that means is it has a set of rules such as that create a consensus mechanism. So broad agreement over a decentralized network. It has smart contracts, which are if then statements of code. And it has some other principles. What that means is that everything can be built on top of that. So ENS is a service built on top of that. And so they've got a smart contract that creates a naming system, and you can go in and buy naming systems. So it's connected to the Ethereum blockchain. It operates on the Ethereum blockchain, but it's not a part of the layer one solution to it.
So when you own jacksaba.eth, which you bought from ENS, when you whatever's the equivalent decentralized social network of Twitter in the future, or maybe Elon goes crazy and does make Twitter decentralized, who knows? But whatever that is, you're saying you could then go over to the equivalent of the Snapchat and use that same jacksaba.eth to sign into Snapchat. And now all your connections come with you without you needing to restart and without running the risk that equivalent Twitter could go out of business and all of a sudden all the hard work that you've built up with all your followers goes poop.
That's really an opportunity. So that...
How are they gonna deplatform and cancel people then?
Oh, no. Oh, no. You know, they still could blacklist wallets, but that is the opportunity to move to another platform. And it goes against the ethos of the crypto community, which is really about autonomy and not needing trusted third party, right? And so I think that was one of the things that we've seen on social media is we're really relying on them as trusted third parties and arbiters. People that run platforms will always have rules over that, but it's going to be the community's ability to exit, right? Like now the exit cost is less because I can bring my followers with me. I can bring my community with me to the next one. And so it rebalances the dynamic between the entity and the community, and then even some. Yeah, go ahead.
So that requires that it has to all be on Ethereum though, correct? It's not like I could do something on Solana and then port over my followers or my community or my data to Ethereum very easily. Or is that where the layer twos come in? Okay.
That's correct. There are bridges that could connect those things. Back to your point earlier when we were talking about the investment and what was happening, and you were just looking for good founders. A core part of our thesis had to be about which ecosystem would win, because there's a network effect to these. The Ethereum is an EVM, which means it's a global community computer, which means that anything that operates on that is in the net, right? And if you're on a different chain, you're outside of that network. There's bridges to them, but the benefits come from operating within this network. And now there's layer twos that help for scaling, like Polygon and others that take on some of the computational effort that Ethereum has to take on. And so that reduces the time, it reduces transaction fees and all these things, but you get the security interoperability of Ethereum having built on that at layer two.
And under that understanding, Ethereum's going to be the one, right? Like where is there room for other layer one? I mean, I understand Bitcoin could be a store of value, but Ethereum's going to be where the consumers are.
So what happened during the initial coin offering phase of the world, that was back in 2017, Ethereum had came out prior to that and started to get really good adoption. And adoption, what I mean by that is the technology community. So people were developing on the technology and they were developing the technology. So there's a really strong network around the community development. Companies raised money, EOS, Neo, Quantum, and a bunch of other companies like, Stellar, Ripple, all these things. They raised a bunch of money to try to compete. Some of them were just trying to be payment rails, but others were trying to compete with Ethereum. And ultimately, they never adopted the community and never established utility for the network. We are seeing an opportunity, between that point of 2017 and where we are today. Ethereum had to scale, and there was a roadmap for its scaling. And scaling a blockchain is really difficult because there's a trade-off between scalability, centralization, and the speed and cost of transactions. And companies came along and they said, hey, we're going to be much faster and we're going to be much more cost effective. Well, what that means was they were more centralized, and you had downtime on things like Solana. Solana as a network and blockchain went down several times, which a blockchain should not do, because if it's decentralized, some nodes will always be running and operating that network. So I think there was an opportunity for companies to compete while Ethereum was delayed in rolling out its scaling solutions. But now that we are where we are, I'm not an Ethereum maximalist. I do hold that there can be a multi-chain universe, but I think that those that thought that they could compete on vanity metrics like transactions per second at the cost of things like decentralization, I don't think that they will ultimately be around. Now, I've taken that perspective as a venture capitalist, which is to say, here are these assumptions I'm seeing. I'm seeing Ethereum as a strong technology solution. I'm seeing it has a really strong development community. I'm seeing layer twos be established, and I'm seeing adoption by large institution. I don't think that other companies will succeed. Now, people will say, Solano, let me throw some cash into that. Let me go see, like, this thing is hyped, like people are using it, and they made a bunch of money over a short period of time. So like as a trader, they made a bunch of money. But as a long-term investor looking at this from a venture approach, I think that entity is going to disestablish, or dissolve at some point. Like, I don't think it's really going to be a chain that's around. And so short-term incorrect, long-term vision, I think is correct on that. So again, that's where I think that the challenge of the technology takes a long time to develop. There's a community participation, and when there's trading, there's expectations. And from there, there's just this like the chaos ensues of the crypto market. So I do think that there could be multiple chains. Ethereum is not going to be the store of value that Bitcoin is, because the principles of it are fundamentally different. Bitcoin is 21 million Bitcoin. Ethereum does not have a defined supply, though they have gone to a deflationary currency. Yeah, we got Solana Mobile pulled up.
I sent you this link. It's fascinating. I think Solana came out with their own phone, or you can pre-order a phone. Have you looked at this?
I have not given it the time of day yet, but that does not mean it doesn't deserve the time of day. I do think an alternative to the Apple iPhone, because their stance on NFTs is incredibly restrictive. They're basically not allowing membership NFTs to participate on the iPhone because they can't capture value in their 30% tax. So I do think a solution for the next wave for Web3 is important, but given Solano's development of blockchains, I don't know that I really have high expectations for them moving into hardware. Hardware is infinitely more difficult than technology and software rather. And I don't know that they've proven to deliver a bug-free solution yet.
So I agree with you. I think maybe on the, specifically to Solana, but that idea that there's going to be potentially, like, Apple's not going to be the king forever, right? Or the queen forever. There was IBM, they fell off. There's plenty of companies that were number one and over time. I wonder if we see a hardware, like a phone that's hardware that ends up being powered by the blockchain as a way to get around the 30% tax that Apple charges, as a way to have more privacy and, more individual control over what you're doing there. Because theoretically, Apple knows everything everyone's doing all the time. And if they really wanted to, they could use that.
And honestly, just as a principle, they're 30% tax on so for those that don't know, any application on the App Store, Uber Eats, Twitter, Discord, whatever it is, every dollar they make, Apple takes 30 cents. And it's a ridiculous monopoly. You can't do it with computers. You can't have your own operating system and tax everything that's used on a computer. I don't think you should be able to use it on a phone. I think that they've enjoyed that luxury for a really long time. And I think they've gotten complacent with their product on the phone side. I mean, every phone's been the same as the one before it. And so I do think that there's an opportunity. And if no one builds it, I swear I'm just going to a flip phone. I'm just going to a flip phone soon. I do need to disconnect from some things. And I think that better solutions are out there.
And all that being said, I still am keeping fingers crossed Apple comes out with a headset, because I'd be more than happy to pay 30% to have a quality VR headset that's $3,000 and sleek and lightweight and everything. Yeah. All right. So I cut you off earlier. You were chatting about NFTs before we went down the Ethereum rabbit hole.
I don't know what we were talking about.
All right. Fair enough. Should we wrap?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So just really quick on the NFT front, people are like, NFTs aren't art, right? And that's the statement that a lot of people make, because art was one of the first use cases of an NFT. But really what an NFT is, a certificate of ownership over a digital asset. If that digital asset is a digital piece of artwork, it is not the art that makes it an NFT. It's connecting that art to a defined certificate so that you know it's authentic, you know how many are out there in the supply, you know the history and provenance of where it was created, when it was created, who owned it, etc. Royalties are involved in this. All of those concepts are not inherent in digital artwork, but they are inherent in the technology. Same can be done for music. Same can be done for movies. Same can be done for a lot of other digital assets. Anything that you've been able to pirate for the past 8 years, 10 years, because it's easy to copy and paste the stuff, is going to have better rights and better systems of value creation for the creator. And I think it's really important to watch and not say the price of these things went up and now they're down, or that person spent millions on this and now it's worth nothing, and like, let's laugh at them. It's like, what actually did that mean for the creator of the technology? Like, how was that artist able to get paid on reoccurring sales of the asset in ways that they wouldn't have been able to? If you create a painting and you sell it, you don't get a royalty on the next sale. You don't get to participate in that, or there's no connection to the community. And I think that NFTs as a concept really do a great job. We're seeing a lot of brands adopt them. So Ethereum is layer 1, Polygon is layer 2. Polygon's working with Starbucks, Nike, Adidas, Disney, I think Coke brands, a bunch of other companies to create their NFTs. And so brands are looking at adopting this. And Starbucks, for example, they're using NFTs within their reward point system. And if you go and read about it, they don't mention NFTs anywhere. They don't mention the blockchain anywhere. They're not a blockchain company. They're a company that's using blockchain. And it's going to be really cool to see how that's adopted, because I hope millions of people use crypto without knowing they're using crypto by
Explain
having
that.
the Starbucks.
Explain that. Starbucks is using NFTs without marketing it as NFT, because that to me shows there's some real value there, because I can't stand everyone just jumping on the NFT bandwagon as a brand and selling, a McGriddle. But how is Starbucks actually using that?
They're using it as part of their rewards points and their reward system. And so they're creating new customer experiences with it. They're creating new benefits from it. And I've not interacted with it, so I don't have like the live example of it, so we can go into it. But what I do know is that they're building on Polygon. I read their website, and nowhere does it mention the technology or NFT, but they're using them. And I think that that's really important for broader adoption. Other places that we saw it, like Decentraland is a metaverse company that's really at the intersection of blockchain and metaverse, and they have really cool gallery, right? So like people are in the metaverse. When you're walking around, people can like host their artwork, and you can click on it and it brings you out to OpenSea, and so you can try to buy it or otherwise, but it connects the digital and the physical and the community. I think that's really interesting to have the opportunity to not just have digital assets that are living out there in the world, but in the metaverse, you can interact and engage with them. And I think that's going to be a really cool use case of it.
That was my whole last company, was that vision, right? Like that was what I was trying to build. All right, we're at time. So what we're going to do is cut this off now. And then I'd love to have you come back on for a second episode. And we basically have a whole second part to both of our careers, where I started building a company out in London. You have been working with your dad to build a real estate company. And I think it'd be really cool for us to kind of share more of those stories. Is there anything that you want to end on that you feel the Metaverse Monday listeners would benefit from hearing?
Yeah, go research decentral DAOs. And the reason that I think that it's so important to understand these is because it's a new alignment of interest from communities and the entity that's creating an environment. And if you want to create a metaverse product, it's consumer focused, strong engagement's going to be critical. The ways that the technology can allow for incentives, can allow for value creation and capture, and can bring in governance. So participation of the community as stakeholders in decisions that will, they'll be affected by, is a really profound way of realigning. And I think ultimately it's going to be a difference maker. You'll have companies that are going to be more centralized, dictating things to their stakeholders, and you'll have those that are more engaged with the community. And I think the latter wins, just because the value accrues and is captured and is allocated differently amongst the community. So if you're in the metaverse, start to look at some great examples. I think Links DAO, Creator DAO, Syndicate DAO, Creator Cabins was the other one, and some others out there are great examples of doing this right. And so I would learn about those and incorporate that into what you're trying to do.
At Creator Cabins, you were going to stay in one of those cabins, if I recall, right? What is that? What is that? Explain that to us.
So Creator Cabins has a 500-year plan, which is just wild as a business, right?
That's just for the record, that's older than the United States. Okay.
So they're going the distance on it. And their big vision is basically to create an economy and community for creators and mobile knowledge work. And so what they have is what they call Location Zero, I think it was. And it's outside Austin. It's on a couple acres of property, and it's a few cabins. And what they do is they bring cohorts through of creators, and they help them with resources and collaboration. The Constitution DAO was started there, and some other ones were started there, which were pretty cool. When I went out there, I was going to host an event and kind of bring people together around an idea, which is, as you alluded to, I'm building a housing company right now. And I think DAOs are going to be a really great way of aligning community towards building more housing. And the short of it is, it's basically a franchise where the DAOs are owned by local, real estate professionals and builders who are building the housing supply, and it's all under a brand. And so I went there to kind of work on that and ideate it. The last day, let me see if I have it. The last day he handed me this, which it's a card for the Cabin DAO, but it's also my NFT. And so
it's furry. Oh yeah.
There we go. So it's also an NFT. So this is it holds my passport, it's called. So the day that I was there, the dates that I were there, it represents my membership.
It scans.
It scans. It's RFID. Yeah, it's RFID. So we'll see them developing. Basically where they'll go from here is helping other people create communities. So multiple housing on a property that's for the creator economy. They'll connect it through culture. They'll connect it through currency. They'll connect it through ideology. And they'll connect it through community. And ultimately, these creator cabin communities will be all over the United States, all across the world, and you'll be able to participate and move amongst them. So it's a long-term vision, not dissimilar to Balaji's network state that we talked about earlier. And they're doing some really interesting things.
Why, let's say I'm a layman and I hear that. Why is that different than the WeWork model? And I understand there's, you're living in the cabins, you're working at WeWork, right? But isn't that essentially the same concept where you're a member at a physical location and you can go to other physical locations locations at different cities?
Theirs is much more focused on the work environment. So having like the co-working spaces, et cetera, et cetera. But truly the fundamental difference is when you were a member of WeWork, you were a paying customer. That's it. You're not a member. You're not a part of the organization. You're not anything. You don't have governance. You don't have an opportunity to capture value that you're helping create. You can't align with them as an individual. You're just a consumer to it. Here, you're a part of the community. And I think eventually you could think of it as like a citizen of a state, right? Like you're not a customer, you're a citizen of Cabin DAO's broader community. And I think that's a really important way to think about it. So the alignment of interest and participation are fundamentally different.
In the sense that with WeWork, Adam Newman was the total controller of all the decisions, and that was for good. And that also ended up being for bad in some scenarios. You're saying with Cabin DAO, it's maybe a similar concept, but all of the members are the people that get a vote on where the business goes, what are the decisions we're going to make, potentially even where the next locations we're opening up.
Yeah, and it's more like we live WeWork than it is WeWork, right? Like it's not.
Sure, I'm talking specifically governance. Yeah, governance.
And I haven't looked at their governance recently, but many DAOs put proposals for spending, right? Like Lynx DAO allocated a budget last year that was kind of insufficient for some of their operations. So they put a proposal out for a larger budget to the NFT holders. We voted on it to approve it with like 95% agreement from the community. And now the funds move from the treasury to their ability to allocate capital as needed, right? So that's where we participated in the allocation of capital that was in the treasury of the entity. And so that's where, Adam Newman would have been like, nah, I'm going to go throw a party with that money. Nah, I'm going to go do this with that money. But he, now there's more transparency and participation.
It's interesting. Like you really wish that, it's hard to imagine. It's probably not possible, but if you could vote on all these minute decisions for the US government or whatever government you're a citizen of, for example, the housing in California, like that's an issue right now, right? So if people had a vote as opposed to just picking a person that then goes and behind closed curtains does something and you're not really sure, but if you're actually voting on each individual issue, it would change the dynamics a lot of how the world operates. I don't think the system today is bad. I just think that is like kind of a logical improvement that only is capable because of the ability that we are all connected in an easily accessible way to send our votes or to voice our opinion just from our phones or from our computer.
Yeah, and so you can do it directly. You can have like a direct democracy where everybody participates and everyone votes. Or what ENS did was representative. So people that were amongst the community said, hey, I want to be a delegate. So people can delegate their voting power to that individual to represent them on these proposals. And then the thing is you can redelegate, right? Like if someone's not representing you, you could then reallocate to somebody else who would represent your perspectives. In the US system, we're so tied to a physical location. I can only vote on the representatives that are within my jurisdictions and districts, except for the presidency. That's the broad category. So this would be like, okay, I'm from New Hampshire originally, and I want to give my, vote to this person. All of a sudden they're not representing me, but this person in Idaho is representing my points of view. And Wyoming is a great example. Wyoming is so far on the forefront of blockchain regulation and use cases. I would delegate my votes over to them so that they could represent me in government without actually having to live there.
I've heard the word Wyoming DAO. Is that what that is?
So what they did was they created a DAO LLC, which is basically a way of creating a actual US entity that is then connected as a DAO and operates as a DAO, which is basically what they basically did was they put provisions in the corporate governance that said you could do this by consensus, either through technology and algorithms or the delegation and voting of people. Better language, more description there if I were to read it. But basically what they did was instead of a DAO being this entity that's on the internet and not within a jurisdiction, they gave a pathway to legitimacy by creating a DAO LLC.
So people can incorporate in Wyoming, they can incorporate a DAO in Wyoming.
So like if I wanted to start a company, I could either incorporate a C corporation in Delaware or a DAO LLC in Wyoming. And then from there, you would have to get foreign registration in whatever, state you're operating in. But now there's a legitimate entity structure that allows you to participate in this capacity. It's a great step forward. Regulatory uncertainty is the biggest thing holding back crypto adoption. And I'm not talking like trading, like everyone should trade anything. Again, 24/7, 365 discovery is not a great thing for the technology, but the use cases need to be there and adoption needs to be had. And the more legitimacy and certainty we can provide from a regulatory standpoint, the more comfortable people can feel participating with it. So they're doing a great job.
If you think back 8 years to when you're in those basements hosting hosting those 15-person events, hoping that the government or just the people on the internet learn about crypto. And now you look at today, it's pretty mind-blowing to then project forward another 7 years, because the stuff that you're saying today is going to be prevalent and it's going to be trendy and it's going to be things that people know about. I had a front row view to watching you say some of the stuff 7 years ago and then watch over 5 years NFTs and other things develop. And so what sounds like a crazy idea today from your mouth, I've learned is actually quite brilliant, quite well thought out, and has come into fruition over the last 7 years. So it's cool to see that, probably in the next decade, we'll see all this stuff happening at a mainstream level.
Can I give you my 10-year out kind of a thought that's going to shape this? So as a society, and particularly in the United States, elsewhere as well, there's a really strong conversation in the dichotomy of capitalism versus socialism, right? There are those that believe that capitalism solves problems through innovation, and there are those that believe that it creates inequality, and socialism is the only means of helping people participate and have a quality of life. I think cryptonomics breaks the dichotomy between capitalism and socialism because it incentivizes innovation, but it aligns interests of stakeholders in a way where people that are a consumer or otherwise now earn equity into this entity. And so as we talk about trying to create social benefit and companies that are mission oriented or trying to solve really big problems, cryptonomics are going to be the fundamental of the companies that start to solve problems in the next 10 years and there forward. So that's my really big prediction. And what cryptonomics are a set of principles that define token structures. Token could be a currency, it could be a governance, it could be an NFT within a company. So you have different, it's basically a token stack associated with the entity for the reasons that it has it. Are they including governance? Are they having membership NFTs? Is there a utility token to operate the network? And so cryptonomics, I think, are going to be really important to companies that want to build communities. And I think it's the solution to the dichotomy of capitalism versus socialism.
And we even see that, that's a growing trend, even in virtual reality, where the companies that have the strongest Discord communities, the strongest online followings, the strongest communities before they launch are the ones that are most successful. And so I really do agree with you. I think this idea that business and community are kind of becoming one and the same, and it's going to become the business is almost more or less governed by the community. And in some ways, we're seeing that already, like cancel culture. Maybe the community is not voting directly into decisions that businesses are having, but they are changing the direction of businesses by voicing their opinion loud enough. And I think that's a wise way to frame it, that over the next 10 years, community, business come together, capitalism, socialism come together, and it just kind of becomes this one big thing.
And those people can voice their opinion within the cryptonomic structure, right? Like they could voice their opinion towards the entity as how they think they should respond to some particular topic. Maybe it's around cancel culture of someone or something. And then two things can happen. Either the community agrees and there's a resolution to operate a different way moving forward in some capacity, or they can exit the community. They can say, hey, this no longer aligns with what I think, but they can bring, as we talked about before, they can exit with their value. If they have followers, if they have currency, if they have, governance or something, like they can exit with some of the value towards the next solution, right? So it's not this like winner take all, we've got to cancel and this entity has to operate. The entity can truly hold the community sentiment and make a collaborative decision about how to move forward. And I think that it will create accountability in a positive way without creating reactive policy that is driven by outrage or otherwise. And I'm not speaking to positives or negatives of cancel culture in either capacity, but I just think that being able to more directly reflect their say in the entity is going to be a better benefit for all that are participating.
Yeah, I think that's happening. All right, last question. So why are you're building a company right now, Bequal. Can you give us a quick intro pitch? And then why are you not building that as DAO, or are you?
Yeah, so Bequal, at Bequal, what we are doing is building more housing faster. And what California did was they created policy to expedite the permitting of backyard homes. So they now, if you wanted to do a multifamily building, it would probably take 18 to 24 months to do permitting. And then you can build your 550 to 300 units. In California, the permitting for a backyard home is 60 days, and there's no time for public comment. It's ministerially approved, which means that anytime we identify a location where we could put a home, we know there's not permitting risk. So we can start to build a scale of housing much faster by using modular development, de-risk permitting, and working with single family properties, which are an abundant of development. We're not trying to compete on multifamily sites or infill lots or otherwise. Single family zoned properties define 75% of most jurisdictions. So what we're doing is we're acquiring homes and building a secondary home. So for every home we buy, we're increasing the supply of housing. We're doing it while diversifying the housing options. So we're building student studios in single family neighborhoods. So if you wanted to live in a community before, you'd have to be in a 3-bedroom home or a 2 or a 4-bedroom home. Now, if you're a single or couple without children, there's a studio option in the same community. And we're doing it in a way that is more sustainable to build than other options out there. So we're trying to we're building more housing faster. We're doing it sustainably, and we're doing it under the regulation within California for now, but we're seeing broader adoption of those policies. There is a place for DAOs in what we're doing. The largest entity out there in the space, single family aggregation. So BlackRock supports a company. They have 80,000 properties. I want to build 800,000 homes. And the way that we are going to do it is by helping people use their underutilized property of a backyard. So the way that Uber helped people utilize their undervalued asset of a car, an Airbnb, a room. We are going to do that with the backyard. And we're going to do it under a brand that is going to then be represented as a DAO so that people can participate from the benefits of us as an organization and the capital that we're putting together and the manufacturing that we're putting together. But they can have ownership over their own portfolio and participate in a way where there's a consolidated brand that represents the mission of more housing faster, solving workforce housing, starting to build supply in communities. So there's a world where it exists, but we as a business need to build certain validation before we get there. When I was doing investment and looking at investments in 2016 and 17 and things, there were companies that were saying, we're doing blockchain for this. And you would ask them about this industry, and they had no idea. One example was a group of people that wanted to create financial inclusion in Africa. Not a single one of them had ever been to Africa. Like, how do you possibly solve a problem that you don't understand intimately? And so what we're going to do is resolve the development problems and then democratize development of housing. And in doing so, we're going to create opportunities for people to create wealth and hopefully generational wealth. If we can get 10,000 people to build a portfolio of 10 homes, that's a million new homes in the ecosystem. And we're 5 million homes short. I think we can do it under an Uber model rather than an institutional approach. And that's where we'll start to bring the technology in at some point in the future.
So as opposed to Uber, where there's somebody in my backseat I don't know, and people 10 years ago would have said that'll never happen. You think that there will be people in your backyard you might not know that are basically living there in a equal home that is going to be part of the norm. And the reason why is because through pure necessity, there's not enough housing for people. And because of that, prices are going through the roof right now. I'm about to re-sign my apartment. The prices are just absurd compared to what I thought I would be paying. And this will be the solution, or one of the key solutions.
What's really important is in our approach, we identify sites where we can create a neighbor. So they have separate parts.
Right. You're creating neighbors.
So it's not like the home is in a backyard and you're looking at each other. While a lot of companies are doing it that way, we are not. We're taking this other approach of identifying where we can create neighbors. So it's moderate density in communities. And that's the really important thing. And yeah, exactly. As people identified underutilized assets and they were out there talking about it, like I have to imagine that Uber, when they were pitching investors, people that are high net worth individuals are like, why would I ever let somebody in my car? Whereas you and me are like, I need to get in somebody's car because it's the most cost effective way of getting to where I need to go. The same thing's going to happen. People are going to say, why would I want to rent my backyard? But when people realize that it's a great way to create multi-generational housing for aging parents or young adults, or to create additional income, or to create income so you can actually buy your first home and help pay down the mortgage, it's going to be adopted really broadly. It's a very nascent market. And because of that, I want to validate really core concepts before creating additional technology risk with DAOs. But I see DAOs as a critical form of distribution and democratizing development. So I think that we reach a scale that a housing company has not reached by using the fundamental principles of the blockchain community and mainly aligning stakeholders.
And the other crazy part is, I mean, you're really doing this. You've spent 4 years now, every day, you are manufacturing homes. You have a manufacturing plant. You figured out the materials. You figured out the designs. Like, it's quite incredible to watch. And you're buying homes, either raising money or taking loans. You're buying homes and you're installing properties into people's backyards and then fencing them off. And essentially, like you said, literally creating a neighbor in your backyard, which allows the original homeowner to now have financial benefit and, if they like the person, social benefit.
Yeah, we launched the company probably 6 or 7 months before the pandemic. So we've gone through the pandemic, we've gone through supply chain issues, we've gone through the venture market compression, and now the real estate market compression. If I had an avatar of my like entrepreneurship journey, it would be a hockey player with no teeth, just smiling. Just smiling with no teeth. You can punch me in the mouth, but I'm still gonna be here every fucking day.